The wind swept softly across the open plains that stretched beyond the Carson Ranch, whispering through the tall, golden grass. Morning light crept over the hills, painting everything in shades of amber. Eli Carson rode out before sunrise, as he always did, his worn hat pulled low, his eyes narrowed against the cold breeze. The creak of the saddle was the only sound in the silence of dawn. He liked it that way, quiet, predictable, empty. Ever since Claire died, silence was the only thing that didn't demand anything from him. The accident had been 3 years ago, yet every dawn still felt like the morning after. He remembered her laughter on that last ride, the way her hair streamed behind her, how she turned to smile at him right before the horse stumbled. He'd tried to save her, but life sometimes broke faster than a man could catch. Now, he just worked and kept breathing. That was enough. When he returned to the ranch yard that day, something was different. A wagon stood near the gate, the mule tied loosely, steam rising from its nostrils in the cold air. Beside it stood a woman, her coat torn at the shoulder, mud caked on her boots, holding a small boy by the hand. The boy's cheeks were red, his eyes wide, and the woman, she looked like she'd been running for miles. "Morning," Eli said gruffly, his deep voice startling the quiet. The woman turned toward him, her eyes weary but steady. "Are you Mr. Carson?" she asked, her voice trembling just slightly. "That's right," he replied, dismounting. He noticed how she held herself, standing tall even though exhaustion weighed on her. "I'm sorry to come uninvited," she said. "My name's Anna Brooks. My husband's gone, left me and my boy with debts. Somebody burned down our cabin 2 nights ago. We've got nowhere else to go." Eli looked at her for a long moment, the wind brushing through his hair. He didn't know what to say. He'd built a life around walls, strong ones, and he didn't let anyone inside them. But something in her voice, something in the way her hand tightened protectively around the boy's shoulder, stirred something deep inside him. "There's an old cabin near the creek," he said finally. "Needs fixing, but it's got a roof and a stove." Tears welled in Anna's eyes, though she blinked them back quickly. "We'll work for it," she said. "I can cook, clean, whatever's needed. I don't want charity." Eli nodded once. "You'll earn your keep here. That's how it works." That was how it began. In the days that followed, life on the ranch changed little on the surface. The cattle still needed feeding, the fences still broke, and the sky still burned red at sunset. But the air felt less hollow somehow. Anna cooked meals that filled the house with warmth, and her laughter, gentle, hesitant at first, echoed softly through the kitchen. Her boy, Tommy, was full of endless curiosity, following Eli around the ranch, asking questions about everything he saw. "Why do cows have 4 stomachs?" the boy asked one morning as Eli fixed a saddle strap. Eli grunted. "Guess they like breakfast 4 times as much as you do." Tommy giggled, and for the first time in a long while, Eli found himself smiling too. It felt strange, foreign, but not unwelcome. Anna noticed the change as well. Sometimes, she'd glance at him across the table during dinner, watching the quiet strength in his movements, the loneliness hidden in his eyes. She didn't try to talk about it, she just let her presence speak where words could not. Weeks passed, and winter began to fade into spring. The ranch started to breathe again, trees budding, creeks thawing, horses restless with the new season. Eli began to find reasons to linger near the creek cabin. He'd bring Anna tools for fixing the door, or an extra load of firewood. Or simply pass by to check the fence line that ran conveniently near her window. One evening, after a long day of mending fences, he stopped by the porch where Anna sat shelling peas. The sunset painted her hair gold, and her hands moved gently, almost rhythmically. "You've done a lot with the place," he said, his tone softer than usual. She smiled faintly. "It's peaceful here. Tommy sleeps better." "I do too." Eli nodded. "Good." He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. "You miss her, don't you?" she asked quietly. The air went still. He didn't move, didn't breathe. Anna's eyes softened. "Your wife. I can see it in the way you look at the hills. Like you're waiting for something that isn't coming back." Eli's jaw tightened. "You talk too much for someone who just got here." Her lips curved in a sad smile. "Maybe, but sometimes silence doesn't heal. It just hides the wound." He walked away without replying, but her words lingered long after. That night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he thought about the woman in the creek cabin, the way she faced her pain without running from it, how she carried herself even when her world had burned. He admired her strength, and that terrified him. The next few days, he tried to keep his distance. He rode out early, came back late, spoke little. But no matter how far he rode, her face haunted him, the way she smiled at Tommy, the quiet fire in her eyes when she worked, the softness she tried to hide behind her resilience. One afternoon, a storm rolled across the plains. Dark clouds swallowed the sky, and the wind howled like something alive. Eli was rounding up the horses when he saw Anna struggling to pull a panicked mare into the barn. The animal kicked and bucked wildly. "Leave her," Eli shouted, running toward her. "I can't. She'll break her leg if she runs into the post." Anna yelled back, rain plastering her hair to her face. Lightning flashed, and the mare reared up. Anna fell backward, hitting the mud hard. Before she could rise, Eli was there, his strong hands lifting her to her feet. Their eyes locked, hers wide with fear, his fierce with worry. For a second, neither spoke. The thunder rumbled above, and something electric hung between them. "I'm fine," she whispered, breathless. "No, you're not," he said roughly, his hand still on her arm. He didn't let go. The rain beat down around them, soaking their clothes, but neither moved. It was as if time had paused, their hearts beating in rhythm with the storm. Her eyes glistened with something unspoken, and his walls began to crack. But then Tommy's small voice called from the cabin door, breaking the moment. Eli stepped back, his hand falling away, his voice low. "Get inside before you catch cold." That night, Eli stood alone in the barn, staring out at the rain. His hands trembled slightly as he wiped the mud from his coat. The echo of her touch lingered on his skin. He didn't understand how someone could bring light back into a heart that had sworn itself to darkness. He told himself it was nothing, that she needed safety, not affection. But deep down, he knew the truth, he was falling for her. And that terrified him more than any storm ever could. When the morning came, the sky was clear again, washed clean by the night's rain. Eli saddled his horse and rode out to the far pasture, telling himself it was just another day. But no matter how far he went, he couldn't escape the image of her standing in the rain, strong and fragile all at once. Something inside him had begun to stir, something he thought had died the day Claire did. And though he didn't yet have the courage to name it, it was already changing everything. The days that followed the storm were heavy with silence. The kind that lingered after. Something almost happened but didn't. Anna and Eli spoke only when they had to. Short words about work, chores, or weather, but every glance between them carried a weight neither could ignore. She would sometimes catch him looking at her from across the yard, his eyes distant and troubled, and he'd quickly turn away. At night, she'd sit by the cabin window after putting Tommy to bed, staring out at the faint light coming from Eli's house, wondering what haunted him so deeply. Eli tried to bury himself in work, riding the fence lines until sundown, mending the roof, or fixing equipment that didn't need fixing. But no matter how hard he worked, he couldn't shake the memory of her voice breaking in the rain, or the way her hand had felt in his. Every moment near her seemed to awaken something in him he'd fought to keep buried. He'd lost Claire, and with her, the part of himself that believed in new beginnings. Yet Anna made that belief stir again, and he didn't know whether to embrace it or fear it. One morning, Eli found Anna near the barn, washing clothes in a wooden tub. Her sleeves were rolled up, and the sunlight caught the damp strands of hair that framed her face. For a moment, he just watched her, remembering what it felt like to have someone's presence make the air feel warmer. When she looked up and caught him watching, he cleared his throat awkwardly. "The east fence needs new posts," he said. She nodded. "I can help after breakfast." "You don't have to," he said quickly. "I want to," she replied, her tone soft but firm. There was a steadiness in her eyes that reminded him of the way Claire used to stand her ground when he was being stubborn. Something in that look made his chest ache. By noon, they were both out by the fence line, working side by side under the wide blue sky. They didn't speak much, but the silence between them wasn't empty anymore, it was alive, filled with unspoken thoughts and small glances. When the hammer slipped from Anna's hand, Eli caught it midair before it hit her foot. Their fingers brushed for only a second, but it was enough to send a pulse of warmth through them both. "Thanks," she murmured. "Don't mention it," he said, though his voice came out lower than he intended. The afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the field as they packed up to head back. Tommy came running toward them, waving a small wooden toy Eli had carved for him a few days earlier. "Look, Mr. Carson, I made her gallop," the boy said proudly, bouncing the toy horse along the ground. Eli smiled faintly. "You've got a good hand for it." Anna's gaze softened as she looked between them. He hasn't smiled like that in months, she said quietly. Eli looked at her, and their eyes held for a heartbeat too long. She was about to say more when the distant sound of horses broke the calm. 2 riders were coming down the dirt road, kicking up dust as they neared the ranch. Something in Eli's gut twisted. He didn't recognize one of the horses, and the other man's posture was too familiar. Anna turned, and her face went pale. "No," she whispered. The first rider was a tall man with a crooked grin and a bottle swinging from his saddle. Hank Brooks, her husband. The second was a rough-looking man with a scar across his jaw. "Well, ain't this a picture?" Hank slurred as he dismounted, his boots crunching the gravel. "You run off to play house with a rancher, Annie. Did you forget you're still my wife?" Eli stepped forward, his voice calm but cold. "You need to leave." Hank smirked. "Not without what's mine." He grabbed Anna's wrist roughly, making her flinch. "You think you can hide from me? I lost everything because of you." "Let her go," Eli said, his voice dropping lower. The other man reached for something under his coat, and Eli's hand went instinctively to the revolver on his hip. The moment hung still in the hot air, the sound of cicadas fading as if the land itself was holding its breath. Then, with a single motion, Eli pulled Hank away from Anna and shoved him back. Hank stumbled but didn't fall. His grin vanished, replaced by something mean and burning. "You're gonna regret that, cowboy." Before Anna could speak, Hank swung at Eli. The punch caught him across the jaw, snapping his head to the side. Eli staggered back, then drove forward with a hard right hook that sent Hank to the ground. The second man tried to step in, but Eli's revolver came up fast, steady as stone. "Mount up and get off my land," Eli said quietly. The man hesitated only a second before hauling Hank to his feet. "This ain't over," Hank spat, blood on his lip. "You'll see me again." Eli stood motionless as they rode away, the dust rising behind them. His jaw throbbed, but he didn't care. When he turned, Anna was on her knees in the dirt, trembling. "You shouldn't have done that," she gasped. "He'll come back. He always does. You don't know what he's capable of." Eli knelt beside her, his voice rough but gentle. "I don't care what he's capable of. You're safe here, I promise." Her eyes filled with tears. "You can't promise that. People always say they can protect me, and then they leave. They die. Her voice broke. "I can't hold it in anymore, Eli. I'm so tired of being scared." She pressed her hands to her face, her shoulders shaking. For a long moment, Eli said nothing. Then he reached out, hesitating before gently pulling her hands away. "You're not alone anymore," he said softly. "Not here." That night, the storm returned, the same wild thunder and driving rain that had haunted the ranch weeks before. Eli was in the barn mending a broken harness when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned, and there she was, soaked from the rain, her eyes red and swollen. "I can't hold it in anymore," she gasped, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I love you, Eli. I tried to fight it. I know I shouldn't, but I can't pretend anymore. I need to tell you before I lose the chance." Eli froze. The sound of rain filled the silence between them. His mind spun with memories, Claire's smile, her laughter, her fall. He'd buried his heart with her, convinced that love only led to pain. But now, looking at Anna, this woman who'd faced hell and still stood strong, he felt something he thought he'd lost forever, hope. He stepped forward slowly, his hands trembling. "Anna," he started, but the words caught in his throat. For years, he'd been afraid to feel, to live, to open himself to anything that might hurt again. But she was standing there, raw and real, offering him the one thing he hadn't believed in anymore. Eli dropped the reins he'd been holding, the leather thudding softly against the dirt. Then, with one quiet breath, he did something unthinkable. He reached for her and pulled her into his arms. She gasped softly, her fingers clutching the back of his shirt, her tears mixing with the rain. The storm raged around them, thunder rolling over the hills, but inside that barn, everything went still. Years of grief and silence washed away as he held her close, his heart beating against hers like it finally remembered how to live. When they finally pulled apart, neither spoke. Words didn't matter anymore. The truth was in their eyes, in the way they breathed the same trembling air. Outside, the rain began to ease, tapering into a soft drizzle. In the days that followed, the ranch seemed different. Tommy laughed more. Anna's voice returned to its warmth, and even the air seemed lighter. Hank never came back, maybe because he knew this time, he'd face a man who had something worth fighting for. Every evening, Eli and Anna sat on the porch watching the sunset stretch across the fields. Sometimes they didn't speak at all, they didn't need to. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was peace. Eli often looked out at the land, the same horizon he'd once faced alone. Now it looked brighter, fuller, alive. He turned to Anna one evening, her hand resting in his, and whispered, "Maybe love isn't about holding on to what you lost. Maybe it's about finding the courage to start again." And as the last light faded beyond the hills, she smiled, the kind of smile that made him believe that even the most broken hearts could find their way home again.